if all of nature had a beginning, whatever created nature can't be made of nature. In other words, it must be something beyond nature, something we would call supernature. In fact, I was at the University of Michigan many years ago, and a former so-called Christian got up to the microphone, and after I had given the cosmological argument that everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause, and the best explanation is a God, a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator. He said, oh, that's a God of the gaps argument. And I said, no, John, it's not a God of the gaps argument. We're not arguing from what we don't know. We're arguing from what we do know. We do know that if space, matter, and time had a beginning, then whatever created it can't be made of space, matter, and time. It must transcend space, matter, and time. And he said, well, if you just give science more time, we're going to figure out a natural cause for all of nature. I said, John, first of all, that sounds a lot like faith. You know, you don't have the answer now, but you have faith that you're going to find it. And secondly, you're never going to find a natural cause for all of nature. By definition, if nature had a beginning, there must be something outside of nature that brought it into existence.
I've gone through the comments section of many of my videos and kind of curated the common themes that come out, the common questions that I see coming up again and again and again, which is obviously an indicator that these are the common roadblocks that people have to understanding the Christian worldview properly. So sort of the shape that this can take is sort of starting broad, and the first, I guess, chapter here, category, would be the distinction or the comparison between God or the universe itself as that sort of first thing. You often hear people talk about, is something eternal? Did something come from nothing? Well, what about God? Is he eternal? And so one iteration of that question, and again, there's thousands of versions of this that I've heard, but one is this. If it came from a creator, a mind writing code, where did that mind come from? This line of thinking asserts something could not come from nothing, which is logical. But did the creator come from nothing? The same logic must be applied again, but most are happy to stop at that point. So what would be your response to this?
There has to be an uncreated first cause, an uncaused first cause. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. Either the universe is the uncaused first cause, or something beyond the universe is the uncaused first cause. All the evidence that we know to this date, including evidence admitted by atheists, is that the universe had a beginning, that the universe can't be the uncaused first cause, that space, time, and matter literally came into existence out of non-being. In other words, there was no thing. And probably, Brandon, we need to clarify what no thing means, because Lawrence Krauss wrote a book about, 10 or 12 years ago called The Universe from Nothing, where he tries to explain how the universe could come into existence out of nothing. But even Krauss admits, when you press him far enough, his nothing is not non-being, as in no thing. His nothing is a quantum vacuum or some pre-existing material of space. And so his nothing was not non-being. Nothing is what rocks dream about, as Aristotle said. If I said I had nothing for lunch today, you wouldn't think I had a plate of food called nothing. You would say, well, Frank didn't have lunch today. That's what we mean, non-being. Something or nothing existed, no thing. And when you look at the evidence, not only from science, but from philosophy, that the universe had a beginning, that time had a beginning, you have to conclude that whatever created space, matter, and time, or space, time, and matter more accurately, can't be made of space, time, and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons could make choices. The cause would also have to be intelligent, to have a mind to make a choice. So I always ask people, whenever you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? And most people, of course, would rightfully say God. Now, this doesn't mean it's the Christian God. I mean, this could be Allah or some other theistic or deistic God. But it is a being that is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent. Now, take that second attribute, timeless. If this being is outside of time, that means it didn't have a beginning. If it didn't have a beginning, it didn't have a cause. So the being that created the universe, as far as we know, appears to be the uncaused first cause, the uncreated, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator. So the evidence just points to that being existed. That being didn't have a beginning, which means that being didn't have a cause. That being is the uncaused first cause. And biblically, that being would be the great I am, the being that had no beginning, the being that had no end, the being that just bees. And by the way, Jesus himself claimed to be that being, because when he's pressed by the Pharisees, he says, before Abraham was born, I am. And what's the I am quotation from? It's a quotation from Exodus 3:14, the burning bush. Do you remember when God appeared to Charlton Heston? And Moses says to God, who should I tell the Israelites you are? And God says to Moses, tell them I am sends you. The being that had no beginning, the being that will have no end, the being that is the ground of all being. So yes, the person has the right intuition that you can't go on an infinite regress of causes, but the person stating that doesn't realize there has to be an uncaused first cause. It's either the universe or something outside the universe, and all the evidence shows it's something outside the universe.
So I think a lot of people, though, do still believe that the universe, or maybe a previous universe or a multiverse or something else, has a eternal nature to it. And I think that what you're saying is that, at least as it relates to this observable universe that we can look at with scientific instruments, you're saying that the science is pointing to that this universe is not eternal. Is that right?
This universe is not eternal. And according to Alexander Vilenkin, who's an agnostic astronomer, with their gourd, I always get their names wrong. The Vilenkin Gourd Booth theorem from 2006. In fact, I have the book on my shelf. It's Many Worlds in One, written by Alexander Vilenkin, who's a believer in the multiverse, by the way. This guy's an agnostic, but he's saying, look, even if there are other universes out there, there has to be an absolute beginning. Now, he doesn't think it's God, but my question is, what else could it be? So you don't get rid of the need for a creator by multiplying creations. You're multiplying the need for a creator by multiplying creations. You know, who's creating these universes? Why are they out there? You can't go, these universes can't be eternal, because in a time-space continuum like ours, you would never get to today if there were an infinite number of moments before today. If there were an infinite number of days before today, you'd never get to today, because you'd always have to live another day before you got to today, if there's an infinite number of days before today. But since today is here, there can only be a finite number of days before today. And if that's the case, then someone created time, and that timeless being didn't have a beginning itself, which means that being's eternal.
I think I want to kind of do some justice to this question, just because it boggles the mind, honestly, in any scenario. It boggles the mind entirely to think that there is actually, like you said, no thing, absolutely nothing, and that somehow, for no reason, we get all of the complexity, beauty, design, meaning, human intelligence. I mean, just everything that we see today coming from literally nothing. That, I think, on its face is entirely absurd. But then the second option would be some sort of eternal thing that isn't God, that is somehow material or something. And I think this is where a lot of people are. I don't think people are saying nothing created everything for no reason. I think they're saying, where do you get this supernatural being? And isn't it more likely that there's just like an eternal atom? But to me, I look at that and I'm like, isn't that just like an eternal, like a rock? That just seems more absurd to me than like you said, someone who has the will to choose to create, or the creative apparatus to. But maybe unpack that a little bit, because I think that I want to be fair to say all three do kind of boggle the mind. An eternal God is a wild thing to think about. Existence itself, if you spend too long thinking about it, is boggling to the mind. So, but maybe zoom in on those two alternatives, and what would be your case for why God, in the sense that Christians mean it, is a better explanation for existence and the reality that we know than the alternatives to him?
Well, let's say the alternative is an eternal universe, as you pointed out. Well, we know the universe is not eternal from science, number one, and we don't have time to get into all the details, but even Stephen Hawking, who was an atheist, said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Okay. So time itself had a beginning. If time had a beginning, what could have created time? Only something timeless, something outside of time. And if you're outside of time, did you have a beginning? No, that you're eternal. That's the point. Okay. Secondly, prior to all this science being discovered, which really began with Einstein and say about the early 1900s when he did his general relativity and special relativity equations and realized the universe had a beginning. Prior to that, atheists had no problem believing in an eternal universe. They said, oh yeah, the universe is eternal. As soon as they realized the universe wasn't eternal and theists began saying, well, the eternal being is God, they suddenly had said, well, you can't have an eternal God. Wait a minute. Whoa, wait. You had no problem believing in an eternal universe, but now you're saying there's a problem believing in an eternal God? Why? Even Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss, 10, 12 years ago, they did this tour, and they themselves admitted that one could make a pretty good case for a deistic God. In other words, a creator who just creates and then leaves his universe. But they said, well, I wouldn't personally accept that case, but you could make a case for it. Now, my question is, what's closer, deism and theism or deism and atheism?
A warm shout out to all the guys out there dealing with hair loss. It's such a common thing for men, but no one really likes to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it. Luckily, there is something that can make a difference, and that something is Keeps. Keeps makes treating hair loss easier, more affordable, and you can do their whole deal from your home. No doctor's visits, just expert care delivered discreetly to your door. If you wanted to test Keeps for yourself, all you'd have to do is fill out a quick online consultation form on the website. It literally takes about a minute, and then they tailor a treatment plan specifically for you. Keeps offers FDA-approved treatments that are clinically proven. We're talking literally 90% effectiveness at treating hair loss and a boost in hair growth up to 35%. It typically takes about 6 months to see the results, so you'll know pretty quick if it's working for you. They've helped nearly 1 million guys keep their hair. They have over 4,500 5-star reviews. They also show you real before and after photos of other people so you can see their results before making the decision for yourself. For my special offer, visit keeps.com/daily dose of wisdom, or you can click the link in the description to see if it's a good fit for you. Now, with that being said, let's dive back into the video.
Well, deism and theism are a lot closer than deism is to atheism. Deism meaning a God who just creates the world and then leaves it. Why are you open to a God who can create the universe, but not open to a God who creates the universe and intervenes in the universe? I think I know the answer, and it might be in Lawrence Krauss's admission that he celebrates there's no God. Why would you celebrate there's no God? It seems to me there's a moral component here. He doesn't want a God who brings morality with him. He's fine with a God who, just creates and then leaves us alone, but he doesn't want a God who's going to stick his nose into his business. That would be inconvenient. And so it seems to me you're left with two possibilities. Either matter gave rise to mind, or mind gave rise to matter. That's it. At the end of the day, those are the two worldviews. And all the evidence shows that mind gave rise to matter, that A, matter's not eternal. B, let me mention another argument. Matter's composed. And whatever's composed must have a composer. But you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. Eventually, you got to get back to an uncomposed composer. And that uncomposed composer isn't made of matter. That uncomposed composer is an unembodied mind who just has the power to metaphorically speak and create. And that's exactly what the scriptures say. So you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. You can't go on an infinite regress of days. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. You're ultimately going to get back to an uncaused first cause. And even if there are multiple universes, that doesn't solve your problem. You still are going to get back to a beginner somewhere.
This is great because this leads very nicely into what I also see all the time in the comment section, various versions of it. But essentially, it's an accusation of God of the gaps. It's the idea of we can't understand that, therefore God. That's kind of the mockery that takes place. How is what you're saying different than that? Because I think this is a key point of miscommunication between theist and atheist. What you just described there to me doesn't sound like there's some complexity that we don't understand, and because we can't understand it, let's just put God into the gap. It sounds like you're saying you're actually making more of a an inference-based case for an intelligent beginning point as opposed to a materialistic beginning point. And I want to zoom in on that because I think that that's another huge area of disconnect. As I read these debate threads in the comment section, I just see people utterly missing each other along that point.
Yeah, maybe the fastest way of getting there is to say, if all of nature had a beginning, whatever created nature can't be made of nature. In other words, it must be something beyond nature, something we would call supernature. In fact, I was at the University of Michigan many years ago, and a former so-called Christian got up to the microphone, and after I had given the cosmological argument that everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause, and the best explanation is a God, a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator. He said, oh, that's a God of the gaps argument. And I said, no, John, it's not a God of the gaps argument. We're not arguing from what we don't know. We're arguing from what we do know. We do know that if space, matter, and time had a beginning, then whatever created it can't be made of space, matter, and time. Must transcend space, matter, and time. And he said, well, if you just give science more time, we're going to figure out a natural cause for all of nature. I said, John, first of all, that sounds a lot like faith. You know, you don't have the answer now, but you have faith that you're going to find it. And secondly, you're never going to find a natural cause for all of nature. By definition, if nature had a beginning, there must be something outside of nature that brought it into existence. I said to say otherwise would be to say, it would be like me saying, if you just give me more time, one day I'm going to figure out I gave birth to my own mother. There's no possibility for that. No matter how much time I have, in principle, it doesn't work because my mother had to exist prior to me. Likewise, supernature had to exist before nature if nature indeed had a beginning. And the evidence from science and the evidence from philosophy shows us nature had a beginning. So look, you're left with it. It's got to be a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, intelligent, personal cause. Now, here's what atheists sometimes will say. Well, we just don't know. Why not just say we don't know what caused the universe? At that point, you should say, oh, so you're admitting something caused it, right? Not nothing. Something caused it, okay? And the second thing I would say is, you're right, we don't know all the attributes of this cause, but we know enough of the attributes to know that it could be the Christian God. We don't know if it's a Christian God, but it could be. If space, matter, time had a beginning, as I said, it's got to be a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator. That could be Allah. That could be some other theistic or deistic God. And we don't know if it's a Christian God until we look at the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And at that point, if we do discover Jesus has risen from the dead, then we can say that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,990 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. But we don't get all the way to Jesus from this argument. We that same thing is true in biology. You don't know if it's the God of the Bible who created life or fine-tuned the universe. It could be the God of the Bible. It could be the God of the Bible that fine-tuned the universe or created life or new life forms. But you don't know that just from a argument about nature. It could be. You got to look at history to discover if Jesus really is God. So I would say it's at the end of the day, there's got to be something supernatural. Can we piggyback on one other thing regarding to this?
Yes.
Because as soon as they say, I don't believe in the supernatural, anything beyond the natural, what you can say then is, why do you believe any of your own thoughts, including the thought that atheism's true? Because if all we are molecules in motion, if we're just molecular machines, if every thought we have is completely driven by the laws of physics, we're just moist robots, then why should we believe anything we think is true, including atheism being true? We shouldn't. But the reason we can trust our thoughts is because we're not driven completely by the laws of physics, because we have the capacity to reason. We have a free will. We can follow the evidence where it leads. If we can't do that, we can't know anything about anything. And yet atheists are asserting they know that there's no God, or they know that evolution's true or whatever.
And I can anticipate the response to that would be, no, we can trust our thoughts because evolution works. But then how do you know that it works unless you're beginning with your trust in your thoughts? So that to me becomes circular as well, which is...
Yeah. And in fact, any defense of reason by reason is circular, because if you're using reason to defend reason, that's just a circular argument. You take the fact that you can reason by faith, and you say, well, because it works. Well, how do you know it works? Because you're using your reason, right? You can see that the things that you think comport with the real world. Okay, let's say we know that. But you see, that's an effect. And what you need to do then is say, what causes that effect? What we ought to be reasoning from, when people ask me, how do you know God exists? I say, I know God by his effects. You know, if there's a creation, that's the effect. I'm reasoning back to a cause of creator. If there's design, that's the effect. I'm reasoning back to a cause of designer. If I have a moral law written on my heart, that's the effect. I'm reasoning back to a cause of moral law giver. If there's, if I have the ability to reason, that I can think about things and they can pertain to what's true outside of my skull, that's an effect. I've got to think, what could have caused this 3-pound brain to have the ability to access these immaterial laws of logic and the senses, so I can think, and it comports with what's outside my skull. Why can I do that? The best explanation for that effect is there's a great mind that my mind and your mind is patterned after. And these laws of logic, which are grounded in his nature, allow us to learn true things about reality. That the very effect of reason should drive people to think there's got to be a great mind out there. Our mind is made in the image of the great mind. It's better explained by just molecules bumping into one another.